Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Drahcir here with a fellow YouTuber, a fellow Warhammer fan, I could say, a fellow guy who really gets into the meat and potatoes of it all. I have Drazule here with me. Did I say that right?
Yes, he did. Yes, happy to be
Beautiful.
here.
Would you like to introduce yourself, tell me about your YouTube channel, and a little bit about yourself, maybe?
Yeah, I go by Drazule, youtube.com/Drazule Gaming, and do stuff very similar to you. In fact, play a lot of Total War mods. Recently been playing a lot of XCOM, the Long War, pretty much just strategy games, mods, stuff like that. Yeah,
Awesome.
basic.
Yep. That's obviously that's why I grabbed this interview with you because you do a lot of similar stuff. So I thought this would be great. Let's crack right into this and get into the hard-hitting questions. So right off the bat, you've played other Games Workshop lore-based games, correct?
Yes, I have. I had played Warhammer Fantasy Battle, so the game that Total War Warhammer is based off of. For a couple of years, played 40K, which is like the sci-fi spin-off. I'm actually really huge into the Dawn of War series, which is like the 40K RTS. I've even played like Mark of Chaos, the kind of mediocre game, which is very similar to what Total Warhammer is going to be. So yeah, plenty of experience with that. I know a lot about the stuff. I love like the lore and things, and really Warhammer has just kind of been like a big part of my life, I guess. So I've been playing that shit since I was like 7. Yeah.
Sounds like a
Of course, it
while.
wasn't very good. I didn't really learn how to play really until much later. But you know what? 7th birthday, I got my first pack of clan rats, and I was like, you know what? I'm good. This is cool.
Awesome.
Rat They got guns. Yeah.
Skaven. So, would you say that the past games for Warhammer that you have played, the Dawn of War's franchise, as we said, even Mark of Chaos, do you feel that those games actually did the lore, the Warhammer Fantasy lore, or even the 40K lore, justice? And do you feel that Creative Assembly could either A, live up to that same kind of justice? Like in my opinion, I feel the Dawn of War franchise did great for the 40K lore and kept up to the IP. Do you feel that Creative Assembly can match that, or do you think they'll actually go under the mark?
Well, I think I have plenty of faith in Creative Assembly. I think that Games Workshop has been completely moronic with their use of the IP lately. That they've been giving out the licenses to make like shitty like card games and like weird small scale indie games which are terrible. But I'm kind of glad to see that Creative Assembly has it because they actually have the resources to make a good game. I think that like there was like a solid path like with like the Dawn of War and 40K. I think a lot of developers maybe like 40K better. I feel like it's almost easier to get into, so it's harder to screw up, unless it's Soulstorm, but that's a whole different story. I won't get into that here, but I think that from what I've seen from the promotional stuff, I think that Creative Assembly is going to get the essence of Warhammer down, if not the exact canon and lore, because they've done some interesting things with it. Like the Empire is the Empire, but Karl Franz doesn't have Sigmar's hammer and stuff like that. So it's weird because what they're saying is that the Empire is going to be a unified faction, but it's a young Karl Franz. And an old Karl Franz doesn't have a unified empire. It's all broken up to like Hawkland and Nordland and stuff like that.
Averland.
Yeah. And then they have this weird color scheme, which isn't the Reichland color scheme, which is what the Emperor should be leading. It's like red and black and gold, as opposed to like the red and white. So it's interesting because they're breaking lore, but they're making a very Warhammer-like thing. It's like almost like alt history. Also, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background.
No, Mike, you can't at all. You're good.
So yeah, it's almost like alt history that like, which I guess is kind of the point of a Total War game, if you think about it, that these things aren't canon. That's not how Karl Franz operates. That's not how the Empire operates. That's not how Reichland looks. But it still could be how it is. Like it's not necessarily not canon. It doesn't break canon. It just kind of is different. So it's interesting that I think that they're going to make a really good Warhammer game. I think that it's really going to feel like it's Warhammer, but it's not necessarily going to be on the good side of some of like the really hardcore Warhammer fans who might think, every little deviation is a travesty in its own right. Yeah.
So I guess we can go off with this one. I guess that we kind of hit a bunch of questions here, a bunch
Yeah,
of nails in the
lots
head,
of points there.
which is good. So let's just wind it back. So your feelings towards the IP when it comes to the DLCs, and do you feel that DLCs will actually kind of bring the lore either more in line with the actual lore? Like, do you feel like the game will be brought more in line with the actual game, with DLCs, with mods, with mods, naturally if they're made by the
There
fans?
will
But
not be mods. That's actually 100% confirmed.
really,
Yeah, Games Workshop won't let Creative Assembly let people make mods because like if somebody wants to make like Spartan faction and Attila just because that's one thing, but there are very specific faction rosters. Like if somebody wants to make the Skaven, they can make the Skaven, and that's going to be the same Skaven product that they would have to sell. So they don't want people doing that. So that's confirmed. I read that from a Creative Assembly representative on the Total War Center.
I did not read
actually
that.
will
Wow.
not be mod support for the game. As for DLC, it's inevitable.
Well, yeah, we all know the DLC trains are coming. That's just going to
Yeah.
happen. But I guess what I'm kind of saying is, do you feel the DLC might pull it more towards canon, more towards options that fit with the actual Warhammer world and the Warhammer lore, or do you feel that actually will branch out and actually kind of touch something else we'll talk about in a little bit here, but Age of Sigmar kind of stuff?
You're gonna hate me, but I'm gonna say it entirely depends, because the game is a trilogy. It's going to be like the 3 standalone games, which kind of like add on that pretty much. I don't know what the expansion packs are going to be, but imagine if there's one expansion pack that adds the new world. It's going to be the exact same map, except now you can have the new world and assumably like Dark Elves and Lizard Man and maybe Clan Pestle or something like that. So if they go with that approach, then it's going to be incredibly story driven, in which case they can probably bring that lore in. In fact, I don't even think there's going to be DLC factions.
Really?
Yeah, because look at it. So Attila has what, like 10 playable factions or something like
Something
that.
like that, yeah.
They're all about the same. They play differently. Depending like style wise, but they're all the same. They're all humans. They have. I think the game has 5 skeletons.
Still, though, a little bit more diverse than what we saw with like Shogun 2.
Yeah. So the game has like 5 skeletons for people, like actual soldiers, and I think like 3 skeletons for mounts. From what I've read, Total Warhammer or Warhammer Total War, whatever it is, they will actually have, I think, like 20 plus mount skeletons on their own. Every single faction is going to be so costly to develop. And if you think about how kind of where the last Roman DLC went, how one faction in the entire DLC had a story-driven campaign, and that's very clearly, in my opinion, kind of like their prototyping for Total Warhammer.
Yeah. Oh, everyone's been definitely harping towards that. Like that, just the direction they're gonna be going for this.
That every single faction is going to be, every single faction is going to be story-driven. They each can have their own independent story. They're going to play very differently. To make a DLC with a faction and a story and all the voice acting required to do that, and to make all the skeletons, like say you add Skaven, you have to add, giant rats, you have to add like a regular clan rat like skeleton, you have to add giant rats, you have all of the things. They're going to be so costly to develop, and then have them have the proper animations to then interact with giants and demigryphs and the Foot of Gork and stuff, that I feel like they would, if they made a DLC faction, it would have to be like $15. I mean, they're already selling $8 for just human factions in Attila. They would be so much more costly that they would either take a loss, that's not what DLC is. DLC is the opposite of a loss.
Yeah, it's a huge game.
Or they would have to have them be so prohibitively expensive that I think they're just going to wait for the expansion packs and add another 4 races per expansion pack. You have 3 of them total. By the end, you have 12 unique factions. So I guess to go back to answer your question, how I think that the DLC is going to affect kind of like the lore and the story, I think that the DLC is going to be the lore and the story, because every single DLC, which is going to be like the expansion packs, are going to be new stories and new arcs and stuff like that to kind of bring in, because the very nature of this this new game that they're making is a story-driven Total War game, one that's very driven by events and triggers and things like that.
All right. So let's now kind of how we hit way back, talking about the IP and how fans will take that. Do you feel this game will split up the community and how CA and Games Workshop handles the lore? I mean, right now, obviously, the community is already split with Age of Sigmar and how to handle that. We'll jump into that a little bit. But when it comes to the changes that CA may do to make the game kind of fit, with their game mechanics, do you feel that there's going to be some tension with, those who are the hardcore, tabletop players and how they view lore and and the potential changes or alterations that they will have to make in this setting?
Just quickly before we go anywhere else with this, anybody who's watching who doesn't know what Age of Sigmar is, it's pretty much a reboot of the Warhammer story, where they literally destroyed the planet Warhammer takes place on, and then the god of mankind makes a new world of realms and also decides, hey, let's take the bad guys and bring them here because we still have to fight. It's completely stupid and everything like that. I'm not going to go further into it right now, but I feel like that's kind of important to understand why Age of Sigmar is very important in this next argument.
Yeah.
So I think that Age of Sigmar is the only reason why Total Warhammer is happening. I think that Games Workshop would, even though Total War games aren't tabletop Warhammer games, they are incredibly similar, and people for decades have been saying they aren't making a tabletop game, and especially when you look at the Dawn of War games, which are very different. When they have base building and point captures and stuff like that. Every single Warhammer game has been very different from the tabletop.
Yes.
And only when the tabletop game ceases to exist, all of a sudden we start hearing about a tabletop-like PC game. Obviously, the Total Warhammer game was announced before Age of Sigmar was announced, but I mean, Age of Sigmar has been in development for years, probably.
Ever since Matt, what was his name?
Ward.
Yes, Matt Ward. Once he left, we knew something was happening.
Yeah. It's bad when Matt Ward leaves.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that Games Workshop only let the game happen because there is no longer a Warhammer Fantasy. People can still play Warhammer Fantasy, but they don't make the models anymore. They're not producing anymore. They're never going to make another rule book unless, the company explodes. But so I think that the only reason why this is happening is that, which is kind of good, because this gives the Warhammer Fantasy fan base somewhere to go. Some sort of support for the IP and the lore, a game that's like what they used to play, and in that universe, in that world, in that lore set. And I think it's good. I don't think it's going to split the community because, you can't stop people from playing Warhammer Fantasy.
True. I'm still playing it. I'm still making armies and art models. Yep.
Okay, unless you're that guy who destroyed $9,000.
Yeah, the guy who burned his whole army. That was
yeah,
that was intense.
That was funny, if not incredibly stupid. But anyway, so I think that it's good because you don't want to play the game, you don't have to, but it kind of gives people, especially people like me who sold their armies and now have no hope of ever building a new army. Yeah, I'll gladly play it. And I'll gladly go ahead and play the dwarves and play the Skaven if they ever put them out. So I think it's the saving grace. It's the last vestige. It's really the only remain of Warhammer Fantasy that's left. And so I think it's a good thing. I think that is probably the best possible thing to happen, considering Age of Sigmar did happen.
All right, so another follow-up question. Do you feel Age of Sigmar might actually bleed into the Creative Assembly's game? Do you feel that actually that might become a DLC or some sort of hinting at to try and get players who are playing this to now play the tabletop?
I can tell you, and if anybody from Creative Assembly decides to watch this, that will fuck you over and destroy your business. I think that makes no sense. Not to diss your question. Age of Sigmar is a completely different game from Warhammer Fantasy Battle. it takes place on a different planet thousands of years later. It's not the same thing.
But we have the
But
same heroes in the end times that are mentioned already
yeah,
in the
but
current lore that we're playing now.
that's like, yeah, when you have like they're imbued with immortality, like they become gods. The horned rat replaces Slaanesh. Anyway, it's like, yes, it's like a sequel series, but it's also so different. Like the scale of the battles is much smaller. They're
Yeah, it's
like
squad based now,
very
pretty much.
different. Like, how do you even reconcile that? Like,
Well,
the
like
very
how I.
description of the map is that we're going to add more to the map with every standalone expansion. So you can either play only on those individual sections, or if you have every single part, you can have a continually expanding map. How do
I
you reconcile that with a game that literally destroys the planet that map takes place on?
That I agree with.
Yeah,
I
and
feel
so
that we won't have a full-on Age of Sigmar situation with CA, but as I said, I do feel there's going to be some bleed over. I feel there might be some DLC packs that have certain Age of Sigmar units, potentially even, or just the End Times lore kind of mentioned in the Black Library, where we start seeing those character stories that are the End Times
okay,
actually become
I can see
storyline
the
DLC.
end times happening. The end times is a thing of Warhammer, but at the same time, like if this story takes place kind of in the beginnings of Karl of Franz, and then the end times is the literal end of Warhammer, there's still so much in between. They would almost jump the gun to do that. Now, I don't know. It would depend, because if they say, do like, there is no Empire faction, in that game in Age of Sigmar. There are the Stormcast
Sigmarines.
Eternals or whatever. The Sigmarines is stupid. And they've actually, if you've ever like actually read the rules, it's that they actually combine the Empire and Bretonia to simply like the people of Sigmaria, because like fucking Sigmars everywhere for some reason.
Yep.
So
Sorry,
they
Kislev.
are, and that's fine. They are actually like not a faction. They're not going to make them models. The only models that exist at the moment are the Stormcast Eternals and the Khorne Bloodborne. I guess you could theoretically put in some of the Khorne Demon units, but like the Khorne Demon units are universal for any Games Workshop IP. I don't see it happening. I don't see Games Workshop even making an Age of Sigmar game for years, because they want people to buy them, minis and stuff. Why would they make a video game about their new IP? Because that would definitely conflict with it, because people don't want to necessarily, the game is shit anyway. So if I wanted to experience it, why would I spend $115 on the starter kit they made, when I could go onto Steam during a sale and pick up Age of Sigmar the MOBA and get my fix of kind of like that character design and that universe setting in a game that's probably much more fun, probably free to play, and like doesn't it doesn't cost money. Like, so I don't see Games Workshop even promoting any sort of game content for that for years, until they either give up on the project, which I feel like that would probably just like cause the end of the company. Not that so they either only if they gave up on the project, so they have to just make money on the IP because they didn't, or it just like they actually get successful with it, in which case it's no longer going to be competition. So I don't know, like they will make dwarf models, I guess. The dwarf faction does seem to be like the most similar to it.
The steampunk dwarves.
Yeah, steampunk Dwarden, or steam powered Dwarden, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, something like that.
So like I guess like they could theoretically put like a skin pack for that, but at the moment it's hard to tell, because they've only released 2 factions, and neither of those factions have a direct correspondent with any a Warhammer Fantasy army, let alone anyone that's featured in that. Hell, I mean the one of the 2 factions is a Khorne faction, but the Chaos in Total Warhammer is going to be Tzeentch.
Yep.
So yeah, there's no real crossover there.
Well, so then here's kind of, I guess, a question that we kind of go back to. So when we have the situations of like where we only have like one chaos god and we only have one empire faction, do you feel the DLCs could it potentially actually split them up and give you kind of like an option to play as Khornites and Nurgles, or play Averland, or someone from Nordland, or even Kislev potentially?
I can see that happening. It all depends on how much they're willing to kind of break up the structure. How I guess like willing they are to sort of build recreate the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
That like right now at the moment they have a thing. They have the big story, like we will play as like Emperor Karvron is leading the empire. They'd have to kind of rebuild that, but at the same time I can totally see it happening. If you look at I think Rome did this too. I didn't play Rome, but then Attila, it's like, okay, you want to play as the Viking factions, here's the 3 Viking factions. You want to play as like the Arab factions, there's only the Sassanids, but like there are sub things within kind of groups of culture. So I could totally see them being like, oh, you want to play a Chaos faction? Well, here's the 4 Chaos factions you can play.
Mm-hmm.
You want to play an Empire faction? Here's, the 18 Empire factions you can play. Hell, I can even see it for, say, like Skaven. Like, you want to play Skaven. Here,
Different
you
clans.
can play as the various clans.
So then,
say they decided to make Chaos Dwarves, which would be really cool because there's no standard army, like dwarf faction, regular dwarves, Chaos Dwarves. So I can see that happening, but it depends on kind of how many corners they write themselves to with the base game, because there's still very little we actually understand about the base game.
Yep. So then another question is, do you feel all the races, like you just mentioned, the Chaos Dwarves, and will we see the ogres? Will we see lizardmen? Will we see these other factions that haven't gotten any limelight yet, that haven't really been mentioned or talked about? Do you feel they'll actually be thrown into this game?
Well, going in on kind of like back to the factions that are canon without army lists, it's entirely possible that Kislev will be featured in the game because they aren't part of the Empire, so they won't just be Empire settlements, or they shouldn't be. And Chaos is going to be featured. They won't be playable, obviously, but it's going to be part of the campaign. Like, the CGI trailer was all Chaos.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see some of these factions being around. Like, you can't have a Storm of Chaos without at least acknowledging Kislev.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they're usually beaten in Kislev. Like, the Empire stops them there with their help, so they don't have to get hurt by it. But I definitely there probably will be. If you kind of look, like the Border Princes, like they're in the playable area.
Mm-hmm.
The Border Princes will probably be somehow represented. Otherwise, like they're just gonna be orc settlements, in which case that would ignore a part of the lore there.
Or about like
just
Bretonnia.
have like Bretonnia. Bretonnia is also gonna be a playable area. It's like, are they gonna be an NPC faction, which you can't play as, but they're gonna be around? I don't know. Ogres, I can see ogres being as mercenaries. Honestly, I don't really know where ogres fall in the old world. So I'm not really sure if they'd have their own empire, but yeah, the ogres would definitely be represented as a mercenary unit of some sort. But when you get the lizardmen and stuff, like I can guarantee you, like expansion pack number 2, so like the third in the trilogy is going to be the old world, because it's too far away when there's so many more immediate factions to add. When you add like like the Skaven and like we got Khemri and stuff, like the stuff you can actually get to by land without crossing the Chaos Wastes. But I think like the old world's gonna be added. Like the way that they're describing the map, like we're gonna just add shit to the map. It's like, yeah, like that's shit to add to the map. Like that is so obviously easy. Like plop it there. It won't take up any, like it won't screw up your map because it's an entirely different continent. So yeah, I think we definitely will see these factions show up to some degree. I'm not sure how much they want to have non-playable factions, but if they're not there, then it's going to hurt the game, because the game's going to have 4 factions, and that, while cool, it's weird because like the Empire and dwarves are allies, but vampires and orcs aren't. So it'd be like a 2v1v1.
Yeah,
which would be kind of weird. So yeah, so I'm going to assume that they're not going to be stupid and not implement NPC factions. So I think that some of these guys will show up, like Britonia, Kislev, and Border Princes are going to have to be there because that space is there. There probably actually will be a Goblin faction. Just thinking now,
The Night Goblin.
I could totally see Night Goblins being there because they're they can reuse assets from orcs. Just plop black robes on them and bam, you have another faction which is orc-like, but not the orcs, which will work. Yeah, but so I can see that working. I'm not sure if I even answered your question there, but
You did.
Okay.
You're talking about how we're going to add other races over time, just how they would do that. Now, lastly, this is probably my last question for this interview. Do you feel, when it comes to the multiplayer, they've said that the previous multiplayer options are going to be carried over in this game. How do you feel that's actually going to carry over in the actual game itself? So, like, say, we do have the DLCs coming out eventually. Do you think we'll actually see, like, maybe an Empire and Chaos co-op? Or, how do you feel these storyline-driven campaigns will actually work in a multiplayer campaign setting? Like,
no, I actually have no experience playing multiplayer, like non-medieval 2 hot seat multiplayer. I haven't really. I only have maybe like 5 hours in Attila and maybe like 20 hours in Shogun 2. So I don't really know how these things work to begin with, but I guess that's entirely up to the players. If a Chaos and Empire faction players who are playing at the same time choose not to fight each other, then the game can't make them fight each other. But with the story-driven content, I mean, it could still go, I guess. I would like to see a more sandbox campaign, which doesn't require you to follow the story missions, I think. So yeah, I think the scripted events should still be around. I don't see why they wouldn't work. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't really know too much about how the multiplayer works.
That is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Well, I do believe that pretty much wraps up any of the questions I have. Would you care to say anything else, or have anything else in your mind you wanted to kind of throw out there? Or?
One bit of a thing that kind of really irks me about this game is that every single unit, without fail, when they charge, jumps.
Yes, a lot of people have pointed that out. It is still very much, it was pre-alpha and it was just scripted events anyway. So I feel that jumping will go away, and once we actually have a proper
It's actually,
collision.
like, they've described it as a mechanic. Every single unit will do that.
Oh, wow.
And it's weird because, unless they decide to change it. Yeah, like, the game is still an alpha. They can always go back on their word. But, there, are pictures and footage of, halberdiers jumping. Why would you jump with a halberd? That makes no sense.
I would just stand my ground and hold it
doing
forward.
I can see demigraphs doing it. But it's weird. But it's I've seen interviews, they've stated that every single unit has an animation because Warhammer is exciting and action-packed, and this is what they should do. But it's kind of weird. It's would a handgunner jump into combat? Does he even know how to do that? Yeah, so it's kind of a weird thing. Maybe they will change it. It did look kind of weird in the footage, but that's, the orcs were charging, it's alpha, that I don't necessarily mind the animation so much as the logic behind every single unit. The demigryph animation looks fucking sick. Oh my god, I can't wait for those guys. But once you start getting to spearmen and halberds and stuff, it's those are weapons you really probably should have both your feet and the ground planted to fight with.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
that's
well,
about it. Yeah.
Would you like to give a personal farewell to the audience here?
Yeah. Well, I guess, thank you for having me on, but, you guys can always check me out at youtube.com/Drazule Gaming. Follow me on Twitter at Drazule Gaming. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. I've never done anything like this before, but I feel like we had some fun conversations, so I hope you guys enjoy it too.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yes, thank you so much for being on here with me, guys. As the links he's described, I'm going to put them down below in the description. All that, you just click down there. What was that?
I'll hold you to that.
Okay, go right ahead. Anyway, guys, do like, favorite, subscribe, comment below, and as always, I'll see you on the high ground.